those who've logged in, excuse me, thank you. Good morning to all of those who've logged into live stream. Sorry about the delay. Thank you for your patience. I'm just going to kick off with a karakia. Me ino tātou e te atua tēnei o tēnei mātou o mema kua poti te hapore o Whanganui arahina I a mātou ke te whakatau no whakatonga pai mō te rohi mō nā tangata katoa ki piki ai te ora o te hapore mi nā iwi katoa o Whanganui humi e, hui e, taiki e. Dear God, here I am, here we are, your elected members of Whanganui. Guide us to make good decisions for the district, for all our people, to uplift the community and all peoples of Whanganui. Bring forth unity. It is done. Right. So I'm just going to kick off the workshop with just some thoughts, and then I'm going to pass over to David Langford, Chief Executive, and the team to run through the agenda and the day, and they'll take us through the day. And we'll have questions. We don't have a queuing system, but today, so we'll just I'll do my best to work out who went first with the lights. But what I want to say is in relation to the workshop today, but also this live workshop, which has had a bit of press lately. And in October, Chief Ombudsman Peter Boschier's report titled Open for Business, a report on local council meetings and workshops, scolded a number of councils, not us, saying it was unacceptable for councils to make informal meetings closed in order to provide elected members a safe place to ask so-called silly questions out of the public eye. He went on to say that councils should take all practicable steps to remove barriers to full participation in the processes. So that means full participation. That's our community being able to listen in and attend. This council has made the move on transparency, openness and visibility a priority at the start of the triennium. Some have said that it is the most transparent, open and visible council ever. I am proud of our council team and council officers for preempting this intent before the Chief Ombudsman's report, with live streaming of workshops where we can. That said, sometimes it isn't appropriate to live stream all workshops, particularly where matters could impact on staff employment, terms and conditions, or commercially sensitive negotiations. Whilst we have had a number of live stream workshops, today we bring you our first live stream LTP workshop in this 24-34 long-term plan process. We have made good progress in our closed door workshops where we've had to discuss, deliberate and debate some challenging topics. For those of you tuning in, you may be asking what a long-term plan is. So let me summarise. The long-term plan, or LTP, sets out council's priorities, including spending proposals over 10-year periods. All councils are required by legislation to finalise an LTP every 3 years. The LTP includes detailed information on the activities, services and projects that councils intend to deliver and what the proposed financial situation, including rates and debt, will be over the coming decade. The LTP process is mostly paid for by rates, council's main income stream. With this income stream, we will need to prioritise what we do and don't do across our district, urban and rural. We will be constrained and we will have to say no to many wishes and nice to haves. Therefore, we will have to work hard to find the right balance between looking after our district and affordability. The 3-year cycle of an LTP ensures it takes account of changing economic and external factors. It is fair to say that things are tough for many people. However, I note that business confidence is the highest it has been since 2015. Interest rates have hopefully plateaued, and inflation, while sticky, is trending downwards. The reality is that right across the country, all councils are facing significant pressures around cost with funding and financing constraints. You only need to read newspapers and the media to understand that there's some real challenges out there. And I was at a Merrill Forum in Palmerston North yesterday, and it's top of people's minds, the quantum of rates increases around our community and with our neighbours, but in particular with some of the large metros and across the country. It's not easy. The reality is, I've said that, some councils are actually heading into calamity, especially those with high debt and suboptimal investment in Three Waters infrastructure and other necessities. I do sound a little bit dramatic there, but I do believe that some councils are in extreme trouble. I'm pleased to say, though, that compared to many councils across the country, Whanganui District Council is in good order. Yes, we have our challenges, which I will talk about soon, but our debt is relatively low and our water assets are relatively sound. I have previously talked about funding and financial constraints that we face in Whanganui, as indeed is faced by all councils around New Zealand. Our rates, like other councils around the country, will be at historically high levels over the next 3 years, just to do the basics. Hamilton recently reported a first year of the LTP of 25.7. It was initially reported in the 30s, but it's gone down to 25.7. Wellington will be over 20%, and I know from my other conversations with other mayors that it will be a struggle for many of them to get below 20% for the first year of rates increases for the LTP. We've consulted with the community on aspirations and wishes in addition to the operational and capital works over the next 10 years. Putting all this in the mix, we currently face 3 rate scenarios for the first year of our LTP, simply high, medium and low. Currently, with our high rate scenario, we're sitting at 14.8 for the first year, followed by 3.8 and 3.7 for years 2 and 3. Medium, 9.5, followed by 6.7 and 6.1 for years 2 and 3, and the low scenario, 5.8, followed by 5.9 and 4.7 for the following 2 years. Each of these hovers around the 20% increase over 3 years. None of these are acceptable. However, that is what we are faced with, and dare I say it, we're in better order than many councils. Even the low scenario that I just mentioned is high from an historical sense. So we're faced with the questions of what is our level of comfort for the next 3 years for rates, balancing community affordability and progress. We have developed a 6-point plan to deliver rate reductions, which we've been working through behind the scenes. Growing our ratepayer base to spread the burden as part of our growing and ambitious district. Improving efficiency. Number 3, exploring alternative funding for projects. 4, cutting council services. 5, selling assets to repay debt. And number 6, identifying sources of non-rates revenue. I've talked to many people and they would hear me say, my biggest stress in the job is the high rates environment. Whilst I saw the headwinds of challenging economic environment coming when I started the role as mayor, I didn't think at the time that a high rates environment would be a multi-year issue. Most people I talk to understand our predicament. The reality is that households are feeling the same pain. And from a personal perspective, my own interest rates have gone from about 2% to 7%, and my building insurance has gone up 31%. Our own household has had to respond by finding ways to increase income and reduce costs. And it's not easy getting that across to 2 teenagers living in the house. Like our household, what do others do in this position? Maybe you can cancel Netflix, switch to cheaper internet, trade your car in for a cheaper model, shop around for cheaper insurance, pay your credit card bill to keep it down since interest is expensive, just to name a few. As a council, we're also looking at ways to tighten the belt because we know our community wants us to be fiscally responsible and responsive to the situation we're in. And so our 6-point plan is our response. The question is, and the question that we're asking ourselves as elected members is, how can we grow our economy and support more houses to increase the number of ratepayers and spread the costs of rates? Where can we find efficiency savings? What alternative funding mechanisms are there for projects? What level of comfort do we have for cutting of council services? Which assets do we sell to repay debt? what are alternative sources of non-rates revenue? My personal preference is that we bear the pain in year one of the LTP, that is the 24-25 year with a high rate scenario. Why? It means we can pay off debt that much faster, which allows our finances to be in a good position quicker so that we can do more to build the community up in the following years. I don't like the phrase kicking the can down the road, but I'm going to use it. But effectively, year after year, we've done that and kept rates as low as possible each year. Eventually, this is not able to be sustained. I believe we need to pick up the can next year rather than kick it down the road. Our average residential rates in Whanganui is $3,480 per annum for each household. The difference between the high rates and medium rate scenario is around $3.54 per week. If we adopt this scenario, it means year two of the LTP 25-26, we have a much more palatable rates increase of around 3.5% for those 2 years, 3.5 or 3.9 or something, 3.8, 3.7. And with that more palatable rates increase, it means we've collectively taken a hit in year one, even if it pains me to say this. If we go high, there will be a number of people in our community who will struggle to pay. To make sure we look after these people, I've asked our Chief Executive to put in place an alternative or an additional rates relief fund and eligibility criteria. I appreciate there will be councillors around the table and members of our community who have a different view, and that's fine. There is no easy answer. No formal decisions have been made until we've heard from our community. And during consultation, we'll present details around each scenario and ask what people prioritise keeping. There will be plenty of opportunities for everyone to have their say, and we look forward to hearing people's thoughts. Thank you. So with that, I'll pass over to David Langford, Chief Executive, to take us through this workshop. David.
Thank you, Matt Andrew. I'm going to start off with a brief introduction to the draft long-term plan that we've put together, and then I'm going to step you through the process that we've been through to put together the 6-point plan that Andrew's just outlined for you in his introduction. But first of all, I would just like to acknowledge the hard work both by our staff, but also you as elected members. The workshops that we've had over the last month have been intense, and you've had to take a lot of information on board. And likewise, our staff, on top of doing their normal job, putting together a long-term plan is always a challenging task that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. To do one in a tougher economic climate is just additional hurdles for them to jump over. So look, I'm really proud of the work that we've collectively done. If I was to summarise this draft long-term plan, there's two themes that come to mind. One is discipline, and the other one is positioning for the future. In the short term, we're facing tough economic conditions and our community is still struggling with the high cost of living. However, in the longer term, Whanganui is a city that's growing and it's got big aspirations for the future, and we've heard this told to us through the Vision for Whanganui work that we've got going on. So whilst we've got the short-term challenge to deal with in terms of funding and financing the council, we need to be careful that we continue to nurture that growth and that we don't accidentally stifle the optimism that we have for the future. When we face tough times, it often introduces us to our inner strengths and invokes our resourcefulness and our innovative spirit. So this 10-year plan introduces some hard-nosed commercial discipline that you'd normally only see in the private sector, but doing so without removing the social spirit that is the council. So disciplines that we've included. looking out for opportunities for efficiency and being purposeful in cutting out anything that could be considered wasteful spending. Our Invest to Save program, the approach to putting business cases in place for every single project that we're planning to do and having a structured prioritization framework so that we pick the winners and we avoid spending money on projects that aren't going to provide a good return of value for our community. And then taking a more commercial approach to our investments and looking for non-rates revenue to supplement and offset what we have to take from our ratepayer. In the short term, our 6-point plan is going to guide how we keep rates increases under control. And this isn't going to be easy. It's going to involve trade-offs. It's going to involve sacrifice. And again, discipline and self-control are going to be needed in order for us to hit our goals. But in the medium to longer term, the plan also positions the city for a bright future. We're proactively planning for population growth. We're investing more in the basics, making sure we've got that core infrastructure in place for roads, water pipes, wastewater pipes, etc. And we're making smart investments in projects that are either going to pay future dividends to the council to help us keep rates low, or they're going to be catalysts for unlocking our economic potential and prosperity for our community. So look, there's no easy solution to this plan other than some fortitude in the face of the challenge and some calm discipline in how we respond to it. So again, repeat my thanks to our staff who've worked really hard behind the scenes to pull this together, and I'll jump into the details of it. So first of all, we're just going to do a quick recap. Long-term plans are often run as projects, and at the beginning of this process we gave you a bit of a runway as to what the 18 months were likely to involve, working backwards from when we needed to have an audited and adopted long-term plan by the end of June 2024 at the absolute latest. So we've been introducing the long-term plan, we've been setting our strategic priorities, running in parallel with the Vision for Whanganui work. The environmental scan, looking at our population projections and some of the key assumptions that will underpin the plan. We're working through, in the background, our funding and financing strategies and the policies. I can't quite read that, hang on. Again, continuing to meet and engage with key stakeholders so that we can build the vision for Whanganui, and working with partners like iwi and Hapu. Asset management plans are underway, as well as a draft infrastructure strategy, which you'll get to see in due course. And then the now infamous budget month and the t-shirt. Some real tough conversations around how do we actually keep rates under control. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this morning. Going forward, you'll then get the performance measures that will set up our KPI framework that will go into the long-term plan. We'll be finalising the consultation document and preparing to go and have that big conversation with our community around what they're prepared to trade off, how much they're prepared to pay in rates for the services that remain. And then once we've completed the consultation, the plan will be finalised, you'll have the hearings, and then you'll be asked to vote to adopt the plan. So that's the roadmap in a very whistle-stop summary. Now, affordable rates is the theme. And when we started November as our budget month, we were looking at an initial rates increase of almost 24% if we just simply rolled forward and carried on doing what we've been doing so far. The big drivers for that are the increase in interest rates. Just like households, when your mortgage comes off its fixed term and you go onto the floating rate and it jumps up, council's in the same boat. The only difference is we've got well over $100 million of debt, and as interest rates go up and some of our fixed terms come to an end and we have to refix at a higher rate, really pushes up the cost of running the council very, very quickly. We've done quite a bit of work in the background to develop that 6-point plan, as the Mayor outlined in his introduction, and we've put together 3 scenarios that provide a range of what's possible and set the foundation for that kind of consultation conversation with our community. So the high rate scenario is coming in at 14.8% in year one, the medium 9.5%, and then the low down to 5.8%. One point I would make is that those scenarios all include the introduction of the new curbside collection. So this is, it's not an apples with apples comparison if you start looking at CPI and other inflation indices, because we're launching a whole brand new service that clearly needs to be paid for. So if you take the 2.2% off for the curbside collection, you can see how that affects the three scenarios for effectively continuing to run the council, but also there's still a whole heap of new projects that go in there, new roads, new pipes in the ground to make sure we're servicing the growth and new housing that's been developed in the city and the wider rural areas. So as you can see, that medium scenario at 7.3% is not that far away from where we've seen inflation. So from my point of view, I think this is a good starting point for the conversation with our community, but it isn't the ending point. We need to talk to the community about where they see us working that 6-point plan and how hard they want to go and how much they're prepared to trade off. So the 6 levers to control rates, or the 6 points in the plan. Growth. We've built into the plan an additional 600k of revenue from new ratepayers that move into the district, that build new houses, that start paying their rates. This is based on the high projection of our population scenarios. So we do need to be mindful that if we want to achieve that, we've got to be investing in that growth-related infrastructure so that people can build houses. We're looking to increase our non-rates revenue. And this is everything from maximizing the dividends from our investments through to increasing the fees and charges and looking for ways for us to commercialize some of the non-core services that council provides. Things like paid for tours behind the scenes at the new Sargent Gallery could be a way of bringing in some money that doesn't come from the ratepayer. Our Invest to Save program, this is about cutting out wasteful spending. It's about finding more efficient ways of delivering the same level of service, but for less effort, less resource. And we've built into the plan an annual saving of 1% a year for the first 3 years. And then once we've kind of got the low-hanging fruit, that comes to about 0.5% per year for the remaining years of the 10-year plan. To put that into context, because of the compounding effect of saving year on year, by year 10, we would have saved about $41 million compared to if we hadn't driven this efficiency program. To enable that, we need to spend a little bit of money, which is where the invest to save philosophy comes in. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Alternative funding. We've been through all of our capital projects and looked at what are the opportunities for us to fundraise so that we don't have to hit the ratepayer up or add money to the debt. A really good candidate for that is the upgrade of the Royal Opera House, where we think it's well positioned to potentially get at least half of its funding from non-ratepayer sources, central government grants, lotteries, etc., etc. And we're going to be going hard to try and bring that money in. Next is having a conversation around what we stop and start and carry on doing, and that includes cutting some of our existing services. And we've set a target to get to that medium scenario. We would have to cut $2 million out of the services that we currently provide. And then finally, we can sell some assets with the intention of paying off some of our debt, because that then helps mitigate some of our interest rate costs and the cost of annual repayments for the debt that we've got on our books at the moment. So those are the 6 levers that we can pull in our 6-point plan to control how high the rates increases are going forward. And when we have the conversation with our community, we're going to be asking them to comment and give us their views on how hard we should pull each of those levers. Some people may want us to pull harder, cut more, to keep rates as low as possible. Others may not be prepared to sacrifice the services, and they may be prepared to pay a little bit more in order to make sure that we keep the services we currently enjoy in place. We'll wait for them to tell us what they want us to do. And as you can see here, there's a sliding scale for some of these things, and this will be the basis in which we have that conversation with our community. $2 million of service cuts the right number? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? And as they pull the levers, hopefully we'll be able to show through the survey tools what the impact on rates will be. Just quickly comparing what is in the high, medium and low scenarios. In the high scenario, we are still chasing after some of the non-rates revenue. Regardless, we think that's a sensible, commercially astute, disciplined thing to do. We're not reinstating the grant funds that were cut as part of this annual plan, so they are being carried forward as they are. If you want to put that money back in to the budget so that we can fund those community groups like you used to do previously, and obviously that will push the rates increase even higher up. The curbside collection service is in for all three scenarios. The main reason for that is we're so far gone down the process now when we've really looked at what it would cost to abort the implementation of those services. The cost of cancelling them outweighs any savings that you would make, particularly given our contractors now started to place orders for a large number of rubbish recycling collection trucks, etc., etc. We have put in place increases to our three waters and our road maintenance and renewals budgets. This is something we've heard very clearly from our community through the community view surveys. They're not happy with the condition of our roads, our footpaths, and we need to be putting more pipes in the ground so that we don't have sewage overflows. We upgrade our drinking water treatment plants so that they maintain compliance with the regulatory framework, and those standards keep getting higher every single year under the new water regulator. Under the high scenario, we put a lot of money in really quickly to drive that improvement. We got a little bit slower pace during the medium scenario to make sure that we keep it less of a shock on rates. And in the low scenario, there's still an increase, but it's only a relatively modest one. We've also heard from our community that we need to improve our levels of service at our aquatics facilities, making sure in particular that we've got enough learn to swim instructors on board so that we can teach our children how to swim safely. Those improvements are in both the high and the medium scenario, but not in the low scenario. So that is one of the trade-offs we'd have to make if we wanted to keep our rates low. Likewise, the museum has not had much in the way of an operating budget increase for quite a few years. In the high scenario, they get a reasonably substantial increase to their budget so they can keep doing what they're doing. There's a modest increase in the medium scenario to help them mitigate the impact of inflation and relieve some of the pressures. And in the low scenario, there's no increase, which effectively would be a real term cut once the pressure of inflation erodes their buying power. We have heard from our community that our grass cutting, burn mowing level of service isn't hitting the mark. People want us to do more, keep the city looking tidier, pick up the grass clippings once we've mown the berms. For all three scenarios, we've not included an increase in the budget to allow this. The main reason is we just don't think it's that critical that it warrants pushing rates up higher than they already are at this point in time, and we think it's something we should keep for the future. We've looked at selling some assets. For the high and medium scenario, we're planning on selling about $16 million of assets so that we can repay some of our debt. In the low scenario, you'd push that up further and potentially be looking to sell $25–30 million of assets to repay more debt and keep the cost of debt repayments and interest lower. Service cuts, again, high, medium and low. We make some cuts in the high scenario. we make some deeper cuts in the medium, and then in the low scenario, we have to start cutting really quite deep to the point where you may be looking at the full closure of some of the council's facilities and services. Additional debt repayments are included in the high scenario. Any early years, as the mayor spoke to in his introduction, if we repay some of our debt earlier, then it positions us well to be making those investments to foster the growth and the ambition that our community has for the future. In the medium scenario, there's still some additional debt repayments, but they don't start happening until the outer years of the plan when we think we can afford it. And in the low scenario, we're just basically meeting the bare minimum debt repayments and nothing more. In all the scenarios, we've prioritised our capital works program and tried to pick the projects that are going to add the most value. Obviously, very little in the way. It's a light touch prioritisation for the high scenario. For the medium, we're a bit more hard-nosed about it, and then in the low scenario, you're absolutely focusing on the bare essentials in order to bring the rates down and sacrificing a lot of the projects that we could do. And then efficiency savings, again, this is some of that commercial management discipline that needs to go into the plan. Whether we're in a high, medium or low scenario, it's something that we should just be doing as a matter of course. So it's in all three.
Excuse me, just clarify something. My understanding that in the current annual plan that we're currently in, we had also cut the town centre regeneration budget as we knew it, and that's not being carried forward, although we do have a major project that we're continuing which will stimulate that area, but you know, as people knew it, that fund is, and that employee in that work stream is discontinuing.
Yes, that's correct. So the fund as it was has not been reinstated. Instead, in its place, we have a few catalytic projects that are in the capital works program that would be the stimulus to revitalising the town centre, but it's not an annualised budget like it used to be. Just to give you a look at what the next 10 years could look like under the various scenarios, this first line on the graph shows our self-imposed rates cap. We have adjusted years 1 and 2 of the cap to account for some additional headroom to introduce the new curbside collection services. For the high scenario, as you can see there, we start off up at 14, just over 14%, and then it drops down, and for the remainder of the plan, we're below the rates cap. The medium scenario, again, starts off above our rates cap, but for several years before it then drops back down again. And then the low scenario is the only scenario where we're completely below our self-imposed rates cap for the entirety of the 10 years. And as you can see, once we get past the first couple of years where we've got these inflationary pressures and the projections are indicating that inflation will reduce, the cost of borrowing and interest rates will also reduce, we're back down to the more traditional territory of relatively low rates. Again, this just provides you some more detail on the medium scenario, and what you can see there is the projection of our debt balance as well. It does start to get quite high in raw number terms, nominal number terms, $270 million. However, what you can't see there is the increase in our revenue as well that balances out. From a prudence point of view, most local government territorial authorities operate with a debt cap of 250% of their revenue, their total income. For this council, our debt cap, we've self-imposed a slightly lower one at only 200%. Based on this 10 years, the peak debt that we get to is still only about 170%. So we still have ample headroom within our debt projections, even though the nominal dollar values look quite high. One of the main drivers for that is some of the big investments in some of those catalytic projects that will hopefully produce future revenue streams for council. And we'll cover some of those off. We've got a slide on our major projects later on. And we also have funding for the Dublin Street Bridge in there, which again adds quite a whack to our debt as we meet our share of funding that project alongside Waka Kotahi. You can also see, though, that once you get past the middle of the plan, the debt projection starts to drop back off again, and we continue to repay debt.
So can you just explain that third column? Did you say that that's, so let's say, for example, the bridge, which we would expect to get Waka Kotahi funding for 62%.
Correct.
Is that revenue side in there?
Yep.
So that is already, so that is the net, what we're.
So that's our borrowing.
Yeah.
Borrowing.
Thank you.
And then, yes, Waka Kotahi's subsidy comes in on the revenue side of the ledger as an income. Yeah. So, for that medium scenario, we need to find efficiencies. It's one of the levers that we can pull. And we are proposing, and we've built into the draft budget, an investor save program. So we've made a number of efficiencies so far this year and last year. That includes reducing our salaries budget by 6% to account for the churn factor of when we have staff leave and we have vacant positions, and that helps us keep our rates down. We've been through a management restructure that has delivered just over $400,000 of cashable savings. We've been running a vacancy management program where we hold off replacing vacant roles where we deem them to be non-critical, and only recruit for roles that are either fully funded by an external party or we consider them critical to keeping the lights on for core services. We've been through a fleet review, and we're shrinking the size of our fleet and getting rid of some of our vehicles because we think we can operate with fewer and be more efficient in how we use those assets that we already have. That's just stage one. We're now monitoring the fleet's utilization, and we'll be going through a phase 2 review in the new year to see if we can make further reductions to the size of the fleet as well. We've looked at some of the investments we were planning to make in back office software systems, our contract management, project management software. We think we can actually do the job with some of the tools that we already have. So we've deferred the investment in those new tools with a view that we will try to use tools like SharePoint, that we can build them ourselves. We've also been through a full review of all of our IT applications. Software licensing is a big cost to the organisation, and we've identified some opportunities for removing tools that we think we don't need, or where we have two tools that do similar jobs. We're going to pick a winner and we'll get rid of the other. And then we're also looking at some of the fixed term contracts for some staff that we have, and we're planning not to renew some of those because, again, we think that we can manage the workload and do without. Going forward, we've put in place a savings target. So this is every single year we'll have a target to try and find more efficiencies as we go throughout the 10 years, with a view that we continue to drive down the cost of running council by finding smarter, more efficient ways to work, or finding cheaper products, alternative materials, those kind of things. Some examples would be paying to upgrade some of the plant and equipment that uses energy at our swimming pools, putting heating covers on the pools so that they're more thermally efficient. And that could cut our power bill. We spend, I think, about $4 million a year on electricity and gas. So if we can make some small savings there in terms of power consumption, they can translate into big dollar savings. So there's a budget in there for management to use to enable those savings initiatives. And as I mentioned earlier, over the 10 years, if you save $1 million in year one, then another $1 million comes off your operating costs in year 2, year 3, onwards and onwards. We'll save about $41 million over the 10 years for our community. And that's just the power of compounding percentages. Increasing our non-rates revenue. So we have locked into the budgets an additional $1.2 million of non-rates revenue. In the early years, that comes from some increases to our parking fees, increasing some of the fees and charges at the splash centre and the use of the gym and other equipment there. Increasing sponsorship at our venues and events. And then looking at how we can get additional revenue by running events at the Sargent Gallery. I mentioned before the idea of behind the scenes tours, but we've made a considerable investment in the gallery. Now it's time to put it to work and get it to start pay back for itself. And then we've also added in additional development contributions. So when people build houses, they should pay for the additional infrastructure that is required to service them. So the team have been busy for a couple of months now working through a revision to our development contributions policy so that we can make sure that growth pays for growth and isn't being too heavily subsidised by the general ratepayer. In the outlying years, we've looked at some of the investments that council can make through its projects. We own some land that is suitable for operating as a quarry. We're going to explore whether we can get resource consents to do that. And if we do, there's opportunities to cut the cost of our roading services by providing our own metal and stone for road building. But then also it could be sold commercially, which will provide an income for council. We're also looking at the opportunity of council investing in being the developer of the hotel. And if that proves to be a profitable venture, then there's a future income stream that would come into council and offset the need for rates. Asset sales is the next lever that we can pull. We're targeting for the medium scenario $16 million of asset sales so that we can repay our debt. We've found, just going through our asset inventories, about $45 million of assets that we believe could be sold. We're putting that list up so that there's some genuine choice. You've got a list of 45 to go at, but you only need to find 16. That gives you some flexibility on what actually gets put up for sale. That's a mixture of land, property, as well as other assets like our carbon credits that we currently hold. We've assumed in the budget that you won't get all of those sold on day one of the financial year, and they're spread throughout the year, just so that the budget is a realistic reflection of what's likely to happen. And from management's point of view, we're recommending that we prioritize some of our non-productive assets. So those are things like some of the buildings that we own that don't have very much rental income to offset their operating cost, or they have potential maintenance liabilities so that we can avoid the cost of having to spend money on upgrades, new roofs, those kind of things. We can pass that on to the new owner to deal with when they buy it from us. Service cuts. For the medium scenario, we've identified a total of about $6.25 million worth of potential service cuts. Those are broad spectrum. They go across almost all of council's core services. They go across some of our CCOs, and they also go across the community funds that are provided through the community contracts and the other organisations that we provide grant funding to. No doubt, if the appetite was there, you could find further cuts. But again, it comes down to that trade-off of what we're prepared to sacrifice in terms of giving up services in order to make the savings. To achieve the medium scenario, we've penciled in $2 million of cuts in order to get the rates down. Obviously, if you want to go lower with the rates, you've got to cut harder and deeper. And this is one of the key questions that we want to talk to the community about during the consultation phase is $2 million the right number? Is it too much and we want to keep some of the services, or is it not enough and the cost of our rates is still too high? And then where do our community's priorities lie? Which services do they want us to prioritise keeping, and which services are the ones that they're happy to forego? And we won't lock in the final numbers until after we've completed the consultation and we've heard from the community on where their priorities lie and how deep and hard they want to go with the cost cutting. I'm now just going to cover off the project prioritisation. Again, this is about being disciplined in what we choose to invest our ratepayers' money in. And we put together a prioritisation framework for you. This was a weighted criteria framework. The first one was strategic fit, and that had the highest weighting. So what we're saying here is we want to do those projects that contribute the most to the bigger picture strategic vision and the direction that we want the city and the district to go in. After that, you want to prioritise those projects that give you the best return in terms of benefits per dollar spent. If they have an economic impact and they can boost jobs and productivity and help make our broader community more prosperous, then that's an important criteria as well. Making sure that we prioritise projects that address regulatory issues or shortfalls in our levels of service next. And then finally, the risk of doing nothing. If we don't act on something and we miss opportunities or we expose ourselves to regulatory risk because we're non-compliant with regulations or legislation, those are projects that we really need to be doing as well. So that's how we've ranked and scored each of our projects. Every project that we've put forward, or almost every project we've put forward, has a point of entry business case. And those are informed by the emerging vision coming from the Vision for Whanganui work in terms of where the community wants to see Whanganui in 2050. Step one, we write the point of entry business cases, and they all go into the sorting hat, so to speak, and there they are ranked based on their merits against the criteria and put into a list, and we reject some projects. They're a poor strategic fit, they're not contributing to our vision, we shouldn't do them, so they come out. Once we've got the list of projects that we think we should do, then there's a process of optimising the programme over the 10 years to ensure that it fits within the affordability envelope, and that becomes our approved portfolio of projects. Here you can see on a scale of 0 to 100 along the bottom how many projects scored along the range. And what you can see there is there's a bit of a bell curve kind of in the data, and we need to draw a cut line. What are the projects that we don't want to do based on their ranking and scoring, and exclude them from funding? Those are the rejects. In an ideal world, it would be as simple and clean as that, but the reality is scoring systems like this aren't perfect. They just help bring order to chaos and structure your thought processes. There will be, though, some no-brainer projects towards the end, at the bottom end of the scale. They're clearly poor investments that we don't want to spend ratepayers' money on. Likewise, there'll be some at the top end of the ranking scale where they're also no-brainers. They're core services, they're upgrades to keep our drinking water system safe and compliant with regulations. You've just got to do them. In the middle, there's a zone of discretion. And you may want to have a conversation around some of those projects that are a little bit under the line, getting bumped up, because actually we do want to do them. And then there may be a couple that have made the cut, but in terms of trading off and keeping rates affordable, you're prepared to push them down below the line and say, actually, we're happy not to do those.
Are we able to ask a question?
Yes?
Thank you. This project prioritisation is obviously at one point in time. So how does a project come back into the equation once it's been rejected at the start there?
So the answer to that depends on why it was rejected.
Yeah.
So if it was rejected simply because we couldn't afford it,
Yeah.
we're going to keep it in the bottom drawer, and when we get to the next long-term plan, we'll pull it back out again and take another look at it. If it was rejected because it's a poor strategic fit, then it's dead. It's gone. We can't have these things constantly circling the drain. Eventually, they have to go down the plug hole and disappear. So project prioritization is as much about killing bad projects as it is about picking the winners and the good projects.
So we would prioritise in 3 years' time.
Look, the intention is that once we get past this long-term plan, we move into a new rhythm of keeping our annual plan and the next long-term plan as a live, living document where we manage the program as we go. As new ideas come in, either from management and officers or from the community, that we start to write the point of entry business cases straight away. We start to pencil them into the 10-year timeline and look for where can we afford to deliver those projects so that we can be constantly building the next draft long-term plan. That'll help us take some of the pain and the effort out of future LTPs so that it won't be as resource intensive as this one has been.
Thank you.
So the optimization of the projects, once you've picked your winners and you've got rid of the bad projects that we want to see go down the drain, I suppose, we need to put them in some kind of order in the 10 years. And to do that, very simple tool, what is urgent, what is important, and the most urgent, most important gets done first, the less urgent, less important gets made to wait. Pretty simple tool that's hopefully self-explanatory. Throughout the last 8-9 months or so, we've had a number of community projects put forward through the Aspirations and Future Projects Committee. And we've been mindful that we treat those fairly alongside all of other projects that officers have put forward. So they've been through exactly the same process. We've worked with the community groups that put forward the ideas, helped them get a point of entry business case drafted up, and then it's gone through the ranking and prioritization process. The projects that have been included in the first draft of the Capital Works program are the two Putiki projects, one for their climate adaptation work and the other for their emergency response project. Wembley Park soccer development plan is in there. The Whanganui cycle trail project is also in there. And then the Hindu burial fountain that came through the consultation on the bylaw has also been added into the work program. Not all of the community projects have made the grade, and that's a simple fact of we can't afford to do everything, so we're going to have to say no to a few of those projects. Likewise, some of the requests that came in were more aligned to requests for operating funding rather than being an actual project itself. Those ones management are redirecting towards the community grant funds, and one of the decisions you'll have is do you want to bolster the funding that you put aside for those grants to create a bit more headroom so that you can give some more money to those community groups that are asking for operating funding rather than an actual project.
Can I ask a question on that? In your introduction to this, you stated that grant funds have not been added in any budget. So how does that equate to this?
So again, it's a draft budget. This is our starting point, not the end point. So again, if you want to give management the direction, or if the community comes through and say, actually, you don't make any cuts to your community grant funding because those organisations provide high value social services and actually do more, then put the budget in. That's your call as the elected members. But again, you do it in terms of knowing the trade-off that you'd be making with pushing the rates increase higher, or compensate by finding something else to cut to balance the books.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Because I think we still, in all of the discussions we had, we've still kept quite a lot of the community grant funds going. It was just that cuts. So,
So, so
I think
for,
this is relevant. We did cut back some of the grant funding for this current annual plan, but we didn't cut all of them. A lot of them have carried, there's still grant funds there, aren't there? There's still quite a
Yes.
lot of grant funds in including the community grant fund.
yeah, so for clarity, this annual plan for this financial year, you made the decision to trim and reduce some of the funds. For the draft budgets, we have not put that money back in, but the funds are still there, just at the reduced amount. You have the choice, if you want to cut them further to bring the rates down, because that could be one of the areas that you cut as part of the service cuts lever. But the flip side is also true. If you want to do more in the community funding space, you can add budget in, but that has the effect of pushing the rates increase higher. Yeah.
So, the projects that came before the aspirations committee, there was quite a number of them besides these, of course. Have those submitters been communicated with and told, or is this the first that they know that they're not on this list?
I'd have to speak to the team about what conversations Stuart's been having. We've been maintaining contact with them in the background, but let me check with Stuart.
Thank you.
So our major projects that I mentioned before, because there are almost 200 capital budget lines in the draft list of projects. Not all of those are making the grade. Some of those have been cut, but there's still probably north of 150 budget lines. A lot of them are routine renewals budgets, paying to replace old pipes that have worn out, put new footpaths down where the old ones have got cracked. It's the BAU stuff, and a lot of those are the things that feature in the upper end of the range that are the no-brainers that we should just do. But there are some notable projects that are noteworthy. First of all, I mentioned before, we're responding to the community feedback around the condition of our roads and our footpath maintenance. So there is a major increase in the replacement and the maintenance budgets for roads and footpaths. This means we can resurface more roads, fix more potholes, and start fixing a lot of the trip hazards and broken footpaths that our community is complaining about around the district. Similarly, there are major increases to our Three Waters budgets. Those cover a broad spectrum of making sure our drinking water services stay compliant with the regulations when the standards get ratcheted up. That means putting UV filtration systems on our treatment plants. It also means that we are upgrading our wastewater pump stations and our stormwater systems so that we keep rainwater out of our wastewater network and minimize the overflows of wastewater that leak from our sewer systems. We're also investing in the growth-related projects so that we can put pipes in the ground and service new subdivisions so that our community can build houses.
Just for clarity for our community, is all this on the Three Waters premised on that the previous government's Three Waters, that affordable water is that we're keeping our Three Waters at this stage, that we're in charge of it, that our community is paying for it?
So the plan that is written includes Three Waters for the full 10 years on the basis that it's easier for us to take it out of our budgets at the last minute than it is to try and add it in at the last minute. We are still anticipating that there will be some form of reform, and it will be a different version compared to what the Labour government had put through in legislation. And now that the coalition government's formed, we're starting to get some clarity on what that might look like. But regardless, we need to make sure that whether it's council delivering Three Waters services or somebody else, there's a really good solid plan in place that makes sure that we're providing a high quality service that's safe and is allowing our community to grow. So we built that plan with a view that if we need to hand that over to another entity that they're in the best position to pick it up and run with it and make sure our community's well looked after. Whether the council's funding it or it's being paid for in a different way and somebody else is doing it is kind of irrelevant from a budgeting point of view. Obviously, when we get direction from central government and they tell us this is what we're going to do and this is when you have to hand over, then we'll adjust the budgets accordingly and take the relevant parts out of our budget and out of our plan and hand over to whatever those new entities might be. Some of our council-controlled organisations that we have as investments have some potential for the future, and to make sure that we're enabling them, we've put provisioning in our budgets for a business case for future growth and development of those investments, and then some on lending to enable them to implement them if they prove that there's an investment worthy business case that's going to produce additional revenue. Some examples of what those could be would be the Pilots Academy adding on the simulator centre so that they can continue to increase the training offering that they have for students, for trainee pilots, sorry. Business case was done a few years ago for that indicated it could be highly profitable. That needs to be revisited and updated, and if the numbers stack up, then there's funding in the outlying years of the plan that would enable council to make that investment and grow the revenue and the economic impact that the Pilots Academy has for the city. Likewise, GasNet needs to future-proof its business, given gas is a transitional energy. So again, there's funding in there for them to do business cases and then invest in whatever may come from those business cases. Could be small-scale solar projects, it could be partnering to do wind farm projects, who knows, but let's take a business case approach to it. If there's an investment that's worth it, then there's funding set aside and provision to enable it to happen. But again, in the outlying years, once we're past the short-term cost of living crisis. We hear it everywhere we go. The city needs a hotel. It's one of the things that's holding us back. It's stopping us with our events. It's stopping us hosting business conferencing, and a whole heap of other tourism-related opportunities are being missed because there's simply not enough accommodation in the city. A lot of work's been done in the last 12 months to try and find a developer or a partner, and as we've gone through that work, we've started to firm up what the opportunity could be from a profit-making point of view if the council was to be the investor and developer. And again, that's an investment we could make on behalf of our community to fill a strategic gap in our city, but then also create a non-rates revenue for the future, which will help us keep rates low. Alongside that, something else to help stimulate the revitalisation of the town centre would be putting in place car parking, building, so that we can enable people to get to work, park close by, shoppers, but also a hotel will need car parking spaces for its guests if they're going to, it's going to be an attractive place for people to stay. The Royal Opera House upgrades, there's a lot of opportunity to bring bigger, better shows to Whanganui and make better use of that asset, but it does need some upgrades so that we can compete with the other opera houses and theatres that have been upgraded across the country. We've kind of been left behind as everyone else has upgraded and improved their facilities. This is one of the projects where there's a huge opportunity for us to get alternative funding, and we've budgeted based on the assumption that we'll manage to secure at least 50% of the funding from other parties. And that will hopefully really take the sting out of that project for the ratepayer. Dublin Street Bridge, again, this is one of those ones that we hear about regularly from our community. We're already working on the business case for it. We're doing modelling as a precursor to then doing design work and getting the engineering done. That's budgeted for replacement in the middle of the long-term plan. I think it was years 5, 6 and 7. Our airport also needs some investment if it's to stay up to pace with rising standards, safety requirements, and a viable asset to support tourism and business travel. It needs a parallel taxiway. There's also opportunities to invest in the property side of the airport, which again could grow future revenues for the council through hangar leasing and those things. So we budgeted for an airport master plan so that we know what we're going to do for the next 20 years in a staged way, and then there's some funding to enable its implementation and kickstart those additional revenues where we can achieve them. So those, and then finally, the North Mole car park and amenities. This is one of the big aspirations from the community down in Castlecliff, at how they want to see the area around the mouth of the river developed, some car parking for people to go down to a new recreational area, public toilets, car parking, those kind of amenities going in there. The community group that have been leading on this project have already secured almost $1 million of tourism infrastructure funding from central government. We just need to put in our share to make sure that this project happens and we can make use of that funding. I'm going to hand over to the mayor because he needs to say something.
My mic's not working, so maybe someone could fix that. Just a couple of things, just on the subject of mics. If you could, elected members, just a reminder, just speak right into the microphone. There are members of the public that can't hear us on the online, so just lean right into it. Second thing is just in regard to this is, I think, a really important slide. Where we've come from, and thank you, David, and your team for what you've done and the work you've taken us through. It's and the behind-the-scenes work that I know your team have done. Up till now, we've talked about the kind of the pain that we're in and the current situation. This is a bit of a transition slide to me, where we are looking at what the future looks like, and we talked about having growth aspirations, and being aspirational about our future. On here, what I like is the mix of infrastructure and also progress as well. So when I talk about infrastructure, footpath maintenance, I even had a note from a constituent or a member of our public this morning saying the footpaths, what about the footpaths? And so what it says here is a major increase in road and footpath maintenance. We've got the Dublin Street Bridge, major increase in 3 waters for growth and performance improvements. These are all infrastructure investments. And what I've found is that, as talking to other councils across the country, there's been a real effort in those some communities across the country. It's top of the ground, shiny objects, and a lack of investment in infrastructure. So I think this is a nice balance of that. Also, when we think about aspirations and growth, we look at the National Stimulator Centre, renewable energy, hotel development, and so on. So the Royal Opera House attracting bigger events. So I think this is a really nice balance of below the ground and infrastructure investment, as well as progress and aspiration.
Thanks. And yep. Thank you, Andrew.
David, can I ask a question?
Yes.
On this slide here. Now, these have all been put in the budget, but is that just for the business case or the implementation of them?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Correct.
So if we implement some of these, how will that affect the projects that we're already running? Will some of them just drop off?
I don't follow your question. Sorry.
Yep. So we have a cut-off line.
Yep.
Okay. So if we introduce these into that priority projects, and
they're already in.
They're already in.
They're already in. So these are the projects that score highly in the ranking process. So they're included in the draft budget already, and we've provisioned both the funding for the business case and then the implementation afterwards. Because if we're serious about having a proper plan, if we're exploring a project, then we need to provision for its implementation. Otherwise, it's not a complete plan. Obviously, if we do the business case and it doesn't stack up, we'll pick on the pilots simulator center as an example. We crunch the numbers and actually it's not going to make a profit. Then we won't do it.
Yep.
Simple as that.
Yeah. So none of these are given, that are yet to be voted on. They're just in the budget.
In the draft budget. So once you've spoken to the community through the consultation process, then you'll have the opportunity as you go through the hearings and then the deliberations to decide whether you do want them in the budget or not. And then even if you put them in the budget, they'll only proceed if they have a proper business case that stacks up. And you can still have the option in the future to take them out if it turns out that they look like they'll be a bad investment based on the business case once we've done the work to put it together.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Rob?
Yeah, just on Three Waters, the public has been fed a story in the past that councils are building up a problem here across the country, and that there's going to be huge investment needed. Now, in terms of Whanganui, that budget that we've got there, that's a 10-year budget, and does that keep our system up to the standard?
So, water, our water network is compliant with the drinking water standards and has been year in, year out for a long time. Those standards are increasing. The investment in the draft budget makes sure we keep pace with those rising standards, and we will remain compliant going forward. From a wastewater point of view, we have known issues with the capacity in our network, and we've had a public workshop on this, and I think there was newspaper articles that followed it up as well, so there's no secrets here. We need to do some upgrades to our pump stations and our big trunk main pipes to put more capacity in so that we can accommodate growth and we can start reducing the number of wastewater overflows we have. Again, the funding to get that work underway is in here. It is a big investment program because it's going to take a lot of pipes in the ground and quite a few upgrades, so it will take 10 years, but there's major investment going in to make sure that we meet those standards and the community expectation around wastewater containment. And then likewise, stormwater, we know that we've still got issues with localised flooding, stormwater getting into our wastewater network that then makes it overflow. So a major program of investing in improved stormwater infrastructure. So my view is we're making the investment that's needed. It's big. It'll be more than $4 million over the next 10 years of upgrades, plus the growth, plus the replacement of the old pipes that are wearing out. So it's a big program, and I think we're doing the right thing, and it's good to be in a position where we can say, well, we're doing what we need to, and we're doing it within the existing rating envelope, and it's not going to put an intolerable financial burden on the community.
Councillor Charlie?
Yeah, thank you. David, regarding the North Mall car park, that facility down there is amazing now, but the road into it with sand drifts and the car park itself are embarrassing. You can barely drive on them. Is there any funds available now to fix that?
Look, I can't answer that off the top of my head. We'll take it away as an action just to see if there's anything we can do in the short term, low cost patching until this project can kick in. But that North Mole car park and amenities project, if you've seen the initial designs that Progress, Castle Clifford and Ringa YY have got under development, all brand new car park, brand new seal, public toilets, new walkway, and I think the road leading up to it is also included, but I need to double check that. But that would be the big fix.
Yeah, that's a priority in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Kate?
Thank you. Two questions. Firstly, I thought I saw that the Whanganui Road walkway was on the projects in list, but that wasn't what I'd gleaned from my reading.
Yes, so obviously building the draft budgets have been a bit of a moving feast. At the last workshop, we told you about how the outlying years of the plan were quite low, and that there was headroom to do a bit more. So what we've done is prioritised in that amber space. If I go back to So in the amber range there, where there's the opportunity for a little bit of horse trading, that was one of the projects that was really close to the cut line. And given the community support for it, and we thought probably some political support for it as well, where we had some headroom and we could afford it, we would drop it into the program. Again, it's only draft. If you disagree, you can take it back out again. But since we spoke last, that is one of the changes we've made to the draft budgets is popping that in so that we can make sure that the community's aspirations are realised alongside what management recommend you need to do from a core services point of view.
My next question is around the popping in and popping out of projects, really. I think our language needs to be careful. There aren't good and bad projects. There are projects within a range. You know, there are projects that will be hugely important to perhaps small groups of our community, but there might not be the cost benefit kind of to the wider community, perhaps. So I think we've got a bit of learning to do about how we pop in and pop out these projects, because times will change, and what might not have been a strategic imperative a couple of years ago might come back into fashion, for example. But specifically, I've got a question in relation to say the simulator centre didn't stack up, and just say it might not be, but say it was it met the threshold for us being what's the words we use around a project being important enough to consult on?
Significant.
Project of significance. If we've got the business case in there, we do the business case, we find that it doesn't stack up, will we need to consult again around a project that might be a significant project?
So that's an interesting...
Maybe the hotel development is a better example.
So the hotel, because that's also earlier on in the program. Yes, we've had some conversations as a management team already around what would be significant projects that you would need to talk to the community about in the consultation document. The hotel is definitely one that we need to have a conversation with them about. The simulator centre would be one for future LTPs, because we're not actually planning to spend any money on that one within this next 3 years. So we can tell the community we're thinking about it, but we'll have a conversation with them at the next LTP when it gets a bit closer. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, I must have faded away, my brain, but in terms of the hotel, if the hotel ends up being way more expensive, for example, than what we think it might be, would we need to reconsult on it?
No, I don't believe so, because when we consult on it this time round, it will be on the basis that we believe it's going to be a profitable investment, and that we will tell the community up front that if the business case indicates that it's not going to be profitable, then we won't proceed. So you will have covered it off in one consultation period. You won't need to redo that.
Councillor Ross.
Oh, thank you. Going back to the improvements, increasing the budget for maintenance of our footpaths and our road network. Is it correct for me to say that whatever we put into that, which we are responding to community input, fix the footpaths, fix the roads, is purely about maintenance? That the costs involved are so horrendous now, or at the moment they're very high. It's not about
improving and adding on. It's about maintaining what we've got to a certain standard, and even maintaining it to that certain standard, prioritise. And that's something the public, I think, if you agree, is something that when we go out to the public, we need to communicate that concern that we've got.
Certainly for the roads and footpaths, that is, as it says up there, it's about maintaining what we've already got. And you are right, there's still prioritisation within that. It's good, prudent asset management to allow your assets to weather in, and their condition will deteriorate, and we pick our moment as to when we actually go and do some maintenance. Because otherwise you'd be spending a huge amount of money trying to maintain all of our footpaths in the highest state of repair, and it's just not cost effective and it's not affordable. So this expectation that because we're spending some more money we're going to have perfect footpaths everywhere is highly unrealistic. But what we will be able to do is deal with the stuff that has deteriorated too far, that's become safety issues, trip hazards, and actually generally lift the overall quality. But there'll still be the odd fault here and there on our network that we'll have to respond to, and we still won't have the money to fix absolutely everything, and neither should we, because we'd be over investing in our assets.
Sorry, Philippa, didn't see there. Councillor Philippa.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is where we're meant to be asking a whole lot of questions. I mean, we've got a lot of information as those are public, but thank you. Recycling and food waste. It was quite early on with the low, medium, high, and then you showed that they're factoring in those recycling services. I guess it's both, and then you showed the difference of the amount, for example. And I think the comment you made was something around, David, the cost benefit or the savings don't justify us looking at breaking it up. So you could confirm your words there. But my question is, and the question that I believe the community's asking, it's certainly been asking me through a column, and it is around, and we've had discussions here at council, but of really testing with the team that's looking at this major service about at least moving food waste more. So our understanding is recycling's coming in about a 3.2% rate increase in 2024, and food waste is 2025 about 2% or just under. So this council has been asking your team to really test what would be the difference of, let's say, kicking food waste down the mayor's new favourite term, down the road a bit, to try and smooth down these significant rates and a cost of living. Can you give us, I think you've kind of answered it, don't know how much you can say in public, but
yeah, look,
it needs to be answered, I believe.
Yeah, I'll cover that off. So during the last few workshops, we had been exploring the possibility of deferring the food waste collection and possibly the curbside collection in order to take some of the pressure off year 1 and 2 in terms of the rates increase there. That was put forward as one of the things that we might be able to do as part of the low scenario to bring the rates further down. Since the last workshop, and you are right, there was some discussion around whether that was a credible thing that we could do, and officers were asked to go away and do some more work to check it out. We've done that work, and we've taken those off the table as options because we don't think they're viable anymore. As I mentioned, yeah, we can't. It's not possible to remove them from our budget. Or delay. Remove or delay. The reason for that is because, as I mentioned in the introduction or early on in this session, we're already well down the path with starting to implement the decisions you've made as part of the long-term plan amendment. We've been through the procurement process. Our supplier is now ordering trucks that if we cancelled or delayed now, there would be a cost to that change. Similarly, we have secured external funding. We have money from MFE and through the waste levy that is subsidising the launch of the services to the tune of a couple of $1 million, that if we were to delay, we would lose that funding. So the costs of deferring actually outweigh the savings that you would make, and then you would just be making implementation of the new service, when you eventually did it, all the more expensive, because the ratepayer would have to pay for it in full rather than having the benefit of the external funding that's available at the moment. So on that basis, management are recommending that we carry on, you stay the course. You've already made the decision through the LTP amendment. It's not something you need to consult on again, because it was done as an LTP amendment. Stay the course. We're so far stepped in blood, we just need to keep going and get it done.
Yeah, thank you. For those online, it's a reminder that by legislation we're required to, that's what you're going to say, we're required to do this at some stage. By 2026, is it? 2026 for recycling, 2030 for food waste, I think.
Sarah can.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question, please?
David.
Some of the feedback I'm getting is from people who are concerned about council being involved in projects like simulators and hotels. Are we looking at an option whereby we could have other people do that and not put our ratepayers at risk with these investments and still potentially get the community benefit from them proceeding?
Short answer to that, David, is yes. And if we can get a private developer to come into town and build a hotel, then that is definitely an option, and council can take a step back from it. My only comment would be, though, council, I believe council should have an appetite for some investment risk, because if we don't, then our only funding and financing tool is rates. And that means we have to put more and more of the burden on the ratepayer. Whereas if we have some investments, and it needs to be well managed and it needs to be proportionate and not too risky, then we can create alternative revenue, which means we can take the pressure off the ratepayer. And that's why the hotel is currently in the mix, is it's potentially one of those profitable ventures that means council can deliver a strategic project for the city and take the pressure off the ratepayer in the long term as well. But always an option for council to back out and say, hey, private sector, you guys do it. We just forego any opportunity along with foregoing the risk that we'd carry. We're almost done now. I'm just going to cover off housing, because again, this was a key strategy of councils, or is a key strategy of councils. It's coming through loud and clear as one of the higher priorities of the community through the Vision for Whanganui work, and it was a key feature of the previous long-term plan as well. So our current draft budgets includes no significant funding for housing projects or upgrade and expansion of our existing pensioner housing portfolio. The reason for that is the scale that is necessary to have an impact in these areas is beyond the council's balance sheet to take. The previous LTP, I think we had budgeted $4 million for a housing initiative. You can't build very many houses for $4 million, even if you do multi-unit duplexes. It's not going to have the impact that we need. Likewise, our pensioner housing portfolio, we have the report from Turley that indicates that we need to replace the existing pensioner housing units with modern new ones, and then we need to at least double the size of the portfolio in order to keep pace with an aging population. There's a circa $100 million investment that we're going to struggle to fit within our balance sheet and our debt headroom. So we have been looking at alternative approaches. We want to make sure we continue to provide the housing for the elderly. It's an important social service that helps provide a part of our community with affordable housing. but we need to do it in a different way than simply debt funding it. So instead, the new plan that we're going to be putting on the table is that council seeks out a private equity funding partner. We've already entered some conversations with potential partners. NZ Super and other pension firms are regularly in the business of investing in these kind of housing ventures. And the concept is that the council would create a housing trust and put the existing pension housing and any social housing aspirations and maybe some land to kickstart the expansion of the program into the trust as the initial capitalisation, and then the funding partner would come with their cash to pay for building new houses and expanding the portfolio. Doing it as a charitable trust means that you can lock in that social purpose and make sure that we continue to look after the existing residents and any new residents that would come to us for housing. That could potentially unlock of the order of magnitude of $300 to $500 million of investment over the next 10 years in building new affordable social housing, with a goal that we could be targeting, say, 1,500 new houses to be built across the pensioner, social, affordable and essential worker categories, because we also need to make sure that if we're growing new businesses and our economy's growing and our population's growing, that people have somewhere desirable to live alongside the social and affordable stuff. So it's a big change in how we would deliver pensioner housing for the elderly, and social housing, but the intention doesn't change. We're still in it for the social good of looking after people in our community that cannot afford to pay for market priced housing. Alongside that, we have, and this is something relatively new into the draft budgets, we have been having discussions around our district plan and the regulatory framework that governs how housing development occurs within our district. Previously, we've pulled back from this space because of the Labor government's reform of the RMA and a move to regional planning committees. However, now that we've got clarity from the coalition government that they're going to move at pace to repeal the RMA reforms, that hurdle has been taken off the table for us. We know that large sections of our existing district plan are seriously overdue for review. The existing district plan was substantially written during periods where we didn't have much in the way of population growth. And as a result, our current regulatory settings just aren't enabling housing. Our reputation as a result is pretty poor as a consenting authority, particularly with the development community, who view us as difficult to work with, and it's stifling the ability to grow and accommodate people with new housing. So we're proposing that we kick off a substantial review of the district plan. This will position us well for any future reforms of the RMA, because we'll have a recent and up-to-date plan that represents the aspirations of our community. We can make sure we continue to safeguard natural resources, the river, and areas of environmental significance, but then also make sure that we are open for business when it comes to industrial and commercial development, so we can grow our business sector, and housing is being developed at pace, but still with good urban design principles. We can be purposeful and deliberate about where we target infill development and intensification and density, but then also be concentrated in growth areas so that we can maximise the value for money of new infrastructure that we have to build and avoid too much urban sprawl, which is cost ineffective or inefficient. So we put a budget in to fund that piece of work with the view that we are gearing up and starting to put in place a project plan for how we would deliver that review over the next 2 years to make us open for business for new housing.
Question?
Michael's first. Just a comment about the housing, pensioner housing in particular. There's a number of people in our community, I think, that are concerned that pensioner housing will become unaffordable. That's not what we're about. from a pensioner housing perspective, we've got an out-of-date housing stock which needs to be replenished, and we need more of it. So the idea is to, the intent is to make it, make housing continually affordable for our pensioner community, but also the quality of the housing, the accommodation needs to be of a high standard as well. So I just wanted to mitigate any concerns we have in that. Councillor Michael.
Sorry,
That was
Andrew.
literally what I was going to say, Andrew, is just to add on to that, maybe you can comment afterwards then, David. There's a lot of out there in fear that we're just basically flogging off all our houses. There'll be less houses, lower quality houses. It's all been privatised. So yeah, just a quick snippet around that for people's ease, that there'll be more houses, higher quality houses, and probably more affordable, and that we're not going to lose massive control of our pensioner and social housing.
Yeah, absolutely correct. The intention is to have more houses and keep them affordable. One of the points I missed was part of the reason for looking at putting the housing into something like a charitable trust is it also opens up the opportunity for central government subsidies to the tenants that council can't currently get. We're not allowed to get those. So that also helps with the affordability side of things. So yeah, absolutely. The whole goal of this is to continue to look after our people, continue to provide housing to a higher standard and in a greater quantity.
Councillor Mayor Helen.
Thank you. In terms of the district plan review, from my memory, when we last did that, it was like a rolling review. It took quite a lot of time, and it also meant that developers were having to constantly come back to us on the new part that we were consulting on, which was very time consuming for them and I know very annoying. How are you planning to do that district plan review? Because it's a big chunk of work.
Yes, it is. So under the RMA, you've got two main ways you can review your district plan. You either do it as a rolling maul, section by section, and spread it out over time, or you do a big bang review of like the whole thing or most of it all in one go. Our current approach in recent years has been that rolling maul of doing it bit by bit, which does mean that it's a never-ending job, and we're constantly calling developers back in to consult and provide feedback through hearings and make decisions. What we're saying is actually we need a big bang approach because we are getting in the way as the regulator and not allowing housing to develop in an efficient way and in a way that has got good urban design and good environmental protections built in. So we need to kind of rip the band-aid off, quick, short, sharp, pain, get it done. So we're building a project plan, we'll put provision for resourcing in there. We believe we can resource up to deliver this. And the team are now actively working on what that project is going to be like, with the view that as soon as we've got budget approval, 1 July, we're at the gate starting the process on this. It does help that because we've been running that rolling maul process, we already have most of the resource we need on staff already, and the district planning team through the road build process is now fully resourced with staff. It's only the consenting side where we're 2 planners short.
Okay, and I believe the town centre was due the next part of the review on that rolling maul system, I think, from memory. So what we'll do is we'll just have that, open it all up, have a good look, and bring the whole of the district into that whole plan, which sounds great.
We've got a list, I think at least 10 sections of the plan are overdue their review anyway. So we kind of needed to take a big bang approach just to get caught up anyway. And given that, we just need to bite the bullet and do it properly so that we're open for business.
Thank you. Getting back to the housing, David, looking at the 1,500, 2,000 houses and things is a great goal. Sounds like Kiwi build. But I want an assurance that it's not going to be the ratepayer's responsibility to provide this housing. And the other assurance I'm looking for is that we are going to do something about emergency housing, because the proposal, the business case that's been put forward, hasn't made the cut. So we have nothing in our plan for emergency housing. And I think that is vital. We need that now.
So, just give me a moment to get my thoughts in order there. It's, yeah. Look, first and foremost, I think we need to be mindful around who's responsible for emergency housing. And first and foremost, it's central government through HUD, MSD, and those agencies need to step up. There are big issues in our city in particular, less so in the rural areas, but the homelessness situation is not good. Council is filling in the gaps between these agencies, and we've got some tough conversations to have with the new government about them making these agencies step up and do their jobs properly before council rushes to throw ratepayer money at a problem that should be already been paid for by taxpayers' money. And our community shouldn't be made to pay twice for fixing this job. So at this point in time, there's no funding for emergency housing in our long-term plan. I would also caution that we don't want to rush to building too much emergency housing and ending up a little bit like Rotorua with all of their motels and emergency housing becoming, really harming the feel of the city. We don't want that for us, and strategically, long term, what we need is more houses that are affordable for people to rent, own, and buy, rather than just ourselves with emergency housing that locks people up in housing with nowhere to go.
Yeah. My concern is that our plan really is in the 5 year, 5 to 10, to get anything of that sort of scale underway. I think that we still have to come up with some sort of effort to ease this emergency housing situation. I know, I totally accept that it's not the ratepayer's responsibility in total, but it is some of the ratepayer's responsibility in that we want our community to be safe, we want to enjoy living in our community, and that's what we have to address.
Yeah, I think, Rob, one of the relevant pieces of the puzzle here is with the Better Off funding that we got access to from central government, we've paid for a feasibility study to look into particularly the homelessness issues that the city has got and explore what emergency housing and homelessness facilities might look like for the city, and we were running the Taupo side in the interim whilst we did that work. I'm pleased to say that we've got through that really quickly, much faster than we originally planned, and we've received the report back that sets out a proposed way forward. The team are working on preparing a report that's going to come to the next council meeting with some recommendations on next steps in that space. So I don't want to say much more because we need to finish drafting the report and then we'll put it on the agenda. But a discussion around some of the things that you're outlining concerns about is imminent.
So the business case that was put forward. That is, we haven't even listened to that. It's never reached the view of anybody here yet, I don't think.
I would disagree with you that we haven't listened. Your business case was a good one in terms of building new pensioner housing and then cycling through by selling the old stock to pay for the new and moving the tenants into new, more modern facilities. Good idea. But again, if you look at the scale that's necessary and the pace we need to move at, unfortunately, that proposal puts us in a go slow mode for an extended period of time, whereas the idea of bringing private equity funding into a special purpose vehicle that can solely focus on building more houses gives us the opportunity to have a much, much bigger impact and do it much, much faster. So on balance, whilst we liked the proposal you put forward, we thought the alternative was more suitable.
Yeah, with respect, we obviously have to discuss this at another time because that's not what the proposal was that was put forward, what you've just described. It wasn't an ongoing thing. It was really to deal with the situation over the next 12 to 18 months. Okay.
Thanks, Rob. All right, before any more questions, I think everyone's hanging out for a coffee, so, yeah. Not sure. So maybe David, if you could just guide us through what the plan is from here.
So we'll take a short comfort break now for 15 minutes. We are going to go off the air. So this is the live portion of the workshop over in Dunwell. After the break, Mike is going to start setting the scene for the funding and rating review. We'll target breaking for lunch at 1 o'clock. And then wrap up as quickly as we can after lunch, depending on how many questions you ask. So there you go. You may even get finished by 1 o'clock.
So I just want to say thank you to those members of our community that are online, and and we've got lots more to come as well. I think there's obviously a council meeting next week and a bunch of other workshops. So thank you, and goodbye for now.